Every single time you crack an egg, you toss the shell straight into the trash without a second thought. We all do it. It feels like the most natural thing in the world. The shell is empty, the shell is waste, into the bin it goes, and you never think about it again, not even for a moment. But right now, today, high up in the mountains, there are old families who would stop you and gently shake their heads if they ever saw you do that. Because to them, that little eggshell isn't garbage at all, not even close. To them, it's free food for the garden that grows the finest, biggest vegetables you've ever tasted. It's a natural scrubber that cleans what nothing else can reach. It's a sharp little shield that guards their plants from the pests that would eat them alive. It's even food that goes right back to the hens to make the very next egg stronger. These mountain families never, ever waste a single shell, not one, because they understand something deep that we've almost completely forgotten, that there is real, genuine value hidden inside the very things we so carelessly throw away. So today I'm going to show you everything the mountain folk do with their humble eggshells, one clever use at a time. And make sure you stay with me right to the very end, because the last use is the big one. It's the old secret that could give you the biggest, healthiest, most beautiful tomatoes and vegetables you have ever grown in your life, completely for free, out of something you were about to drop in the trash this very morning. But let's start at the beginning. Before we get into it all, just stop and think for a moment about how very much we throw away every day without ever once stopping to wonder if it's truly waste at all. A modern kitchen produces a whole bin full of so-called garbage every single day, and a great deal of it, if we're honest, isn't really garbage at all. It's valuable resources that we simply never learned how to see. The mountain families look at those very same things and they see usefulness absolutely everywhere, because they had to learn to, and because that's exactly how their parents and their grandparents lived before them. Nothing ever left their home as waste if it could possibly be put to good use first. That was the iron rule of a mountain household. And the humble eggshell is one of the very finest examples of it there is. Something that almost every household on earth produces, that almost every household throws straight away, and that almost no one alive today realizes is quietly one of the most genuinely useful free things you could ever have your hands on. So if you've ever had the quiet feeling that we've all grown far too wasteful, that our grandparents understood the true worth of ordinary things in a way that we've sadly lost, then do me a favor and subscribe, and stay right here with me. Because rescuing exactly this kind of thrifty, practical, forgotten know-how before it vanishes for good is precisely what this whole channel is for. Now let's see what the mountain folk actually do with those shells. But first, one quick and important practical note, because it makes all the difference between shells that work for you and shells that just make a smell. The mountain families always prepare their shells properly before storing them. As soon as you've used an egg, give the shell a quick rinse under the tap to clean out any leftover white, because that's the bit that goes bad and smells. Then let the shells dry out completely. Spread them on a tray or a windowsill for a day or two, or pop them in the oven for a few minutes after you've finished baking, using the leftover warmth to dry them fast. Bone-dry shells won't smell and won't rot. Once they're fully dry, you can crush them coarse for the garden and the slugs, fine as powder for the soil and the hens, and store them in a jar or a tin until you need them. That's the whole secret to keeping a good supply on hand. Now, with that said, let's get into the uses themselves. The first thing mountain families do with their eggshells is use them as a natural scouring cleaner, and it is absolutely brilliant for the cleaning jobs that nothing else on earth can reach. Just think for a moment about the things that are very nearly impossible to scrub clean inside. The bottom of a narrow bottle, a tall, thin vase, a thermos flask, a jar with a small mouth, a pot with stubborn grime stuck hard in the corners. Your hand can't fit, your sponge can't reach, and you end up giving up. The mountain families solve it all with crushed eggshells, and here is exactly why it works so well. The shell is hard and naturally slightly abrasive, just gritty and sharp enough to scrub away stuck-on grime and grease, but not so harsh that it scratches and ruins the surface underneath. So they crush up a shell or two into small pieces, drop those pieces right down into the bottle or the jar, along with a little warm water and a single drop of soap, and then they cover it and swirl and shake it hard. Those sharp little pieces of shell go scouring around inside, scrubbing every surface that your hand and your sponge could never hope to reach, and out comes all the dirt and grime with the water. Here's exactly how you do it in your own home. Crush a clean, dry eggshell into small pieces. Drop them down into that impossible-to-clean bottle or jar along with some warm water and a little drop of soap. Cover it tightly and shake it good and hard for a minute or so. Then pour it all out, give it a rinse, and you'll find it clean and clear inside. It's a completely free scrubber for the exact jobs that nothing else can do. And the same trick cleans out a stained, grimy coffee pot or a crusty old kettle. Beautifully drop in some crushed shell with water. Swirl it around, and it scours the inside clean where your hand and brush can't reach. But the second use takes those very same humble shells right outside, into the garden, where they do some of their finest work. The second thing they do with eggshells is keep the slugs and the snails away from their precious plants naturally and with absolutely no poison whatsoever. Now, any gardener who has ever grown anything knows the particular heartbreak of walking out first thing in the morning, full of hope, only to find that slugs and snails have crept in overnight and eaten all the tender young plants down to ragged, ruined stalks. The mountain families stop them dead with crushed eggshells, and here is exactly why it works so beautifully. Slugs and snails move along the ground on soft, tender, slimy bodies, and they simply cannot bear to drag those soft bodies across the sharp, jagged, broken edges of crushed eggshell. To a soft little slug, a ring of crushed shell is like a field of broken glass, and so it reaches that barrier and it turns straight back. So the families crush their shells up nice and coarse, and this is important, not too fine, because you want to keep those sharp, jagged edges intact, and they scatter a protective ring of them right around the base of their precious young plants and seedlings. The slugs and the snails reach that sharp barrier and they go no further. Here's exactly how you do it. Save and dry your eggshells, crush them into coarse, sharp little pieces, and sprinkle a generous protective ring of them around the base of the plants you most want to protect. Just refresh it now and then, especially after a heavy rain, since it works best when the edges are dry and sharp. No expensive slug pellets, no poison anywhere near your food and your family, just a free, natural barrier made from your own breakfast. And unlike the poison pellets, it's completely safe for the birds, the hedgehogs, and the pets that might wander through your garden, which is exactly why the old folk always preferred it. But the third use is honestly one of the most charming and clever of them all. The third thing they do with eggshells is start their seeds right inside them, turning the humble shell itself into a tiny, perfect, completely biodegradable little plant pot. This is a truly lovely piece of mountain thrift and cleverness. When they crack an egg carefully, leaving the bottom half of the shell whole and intact like a little cup, they save that half shell. They poke one tiny drainage hole in the very bottom of it, fill it up with a bit of good soil, and plant a single seed right inside it. And that little half shell becomes a perfect tiny seed-starting pot, sitting up neatly and safely right back in the egg carton it came from. And here's the truly clever, genius part of the whole thing. When the little seedling has grown big enough and strong enough to go out into the garden, you don't even have to take it out of the shell at all. You simply give the shell a gentle squeeze to crack it a little, and you plant the whole thing, seedling, soil, shell, and all, straight down into the ground. The shell then breaks down naturally in the soil, and as it does, it feeds that young growing plant with calcium right where it needs it. The pot literally becomes the plant food. Here's exactly how you do it. Save your cleaner half shells, poke a small hole in the bottom of each one, fill them with soil, plant your seeds, and keep them sitting in the egg carton up on a sunny windowsill. Then when they're ready, gently crack the shell and plant the whole thing in the ground. They're free seed pots that feed the plant as they slowly dissolve away. And there's a quiet charm to it, too. A whole egg carton of little green seedlings sprouting from eggshells on the windowsill is one of the prettiest, most hopeful sights of early spring, and it costs nothing but the shells you'd have thrown away. But the fourth use solves a really common garden problem that most people end up spending good money on. The fourth thing they do with eggshells is improve the drainage in their plant pots and their planters. Now, plants absolutely hate sitting in soggy, waterlogged, heavy soil. Their roots rot away and the whole plant sickens and dies, which is exactly why good drainage matters so very much to a gardener. People go out and buy special little stones and materials to put in the bottom of their pots just for this one job. The mountain families simply use a layer of coarsely crushed eggshells instead. Scattered across the bottom of a plant pot before the soil goes in on top, those coarse, irregular pieces of shell create little gaps, spaces, and channels that let all the excess water drain freely away from the delicate roots, keeping the plant healthy and happy. And as a wonderful bonus on top of that, those same shells slowly break down over time and quietly feed precious calcium into the soil for the plant. Here's exactly how you do it. Before you fill any pot with soil, just scatter a good layer of coarsely crushed eggshells across the bottom of it. They keep the drainage open and flowing, and they feed the plants slowly as they go. It's completely free, and it does two important jobs at the very same time. And here's a related bonus the old folk love. They steep a good handful of crushed shells in a jar of water for a few days, and then use that mineral-rich eggshell water to water their houseplants and seedlings, giving them a gentle drink of calcium straight to the roots. But the fifth use builds the very richest soil of all. The fifth thing they do with eggshells is add them to the compost heap. Now, every good gardener on earth knows that rich, dark, crumbly compost is absolute black gold for the garden, and the mountain families make their compost even richer and better by always adding their crushed eggshells into it. As those shells slowly break down within the heap, they add valuable calcium and minerals into the finished compost, which then goes on to feed the entire garden, bed by bed. And here's the key trick that most people miss. You have to crush them up first. Whole, intact eggshells take a remarkably long time to break down in a compost heap. You'll find them still sitting there months later. But crushed shells break down far, far faster and release all their goodness into the heap much more quickly. Here's exactly how you do it. Crush up your clean, dry eggshells nice and small and toss them into your compost heap or your compost bin, along with all your other kitchen scraps and garden waste. Over time, they enrich the whole batch and make your finished compost better. It costs you absolutely nothing, and it quietly turns what you thought was waste into far better soil for everything you grow. And here's a small tip the old folk follow. They keep a little dish or bag of crushed shells right by the back door, so adding them to the heap becomes as easy and natural as scraping a plate, because a habit only sticks if it's easy. But the sixth use captures the entire beautiful spirit of the mountain way, the perfect, unbroken circle. The sixth thing they do with eggshells is the one I honestly find the most beautiful of them all. They feed the shells right back to the hens. Now, this one might genuinely surprise you at first, feeding eggshells to the very chickens that laid them, but it is pure, simple genius, and it completes a perfect and beautiful circle. Here's the reasoning. Hens need a great deal of calcium in their diet to keep on laying eggs with good, strong, hard shells, and an eggshell, of course, is almost entirely pure calcium itself. So the mountain families dry out their used shells, crush them up nice and fine, and feed them right back to their flock of chickens. The hens take in all that good calcium, and they use it directly to make the shells of their next eggs strong and hard and healthy. Just stop and think about the perfect, beautiful logic of it for a moment. The eggshell quite literally becomes the next eggshell. Nothing at all is bought from a store, nothing whatsoever is wasted, and the whole circle simply closes right back on itself, round and round and round, season after season. The hen gives the family the egg family eats the egg, and the shell goes right back to the hen to help make the very next one. That, right there, is the entire spirit of how these mountain families have always lived their lives, nothing wasted, everything quietly flowing back around in a circle. Here's exactly how it's done. Dry the used shells out well, crush them up small enough that the hens can peck and eat them easily, and simply offer them back to your flock. Strong shells, strong, healthy hens, and not a single scrap of anything wasted along the way. The old folks smile at this one, because it's the whole of their philosophy held in a single handful. What comes from the hen goes back to the hen. But now, at last we come to the seventh and the final use, the big one. The one I promised you right at the very start. The seventh thing mountain families do with eggshells is the most valuable use of all. They use them to feed and enrich the garden soil, and to grow the most magnificent, healthy vegetables you have ever laid eyes on. This is the great old secret hiding behind those garden tomatoes the size of your fist. So here is the why behind it all. Eggshells are almost pure calcium, and calcium happens to be one of the key things that growing plants, and especially tomatoes, peppers, and squash, absolutely crave and need to thrive. In fact, there's a genuinely heartbreaking problem that ruins so many people's tomato harvests every single year, where the whole bottom of the fruit turns black, sunken, and rotten, just as it's finally starting to ripen on the vine. And that miserable problem is very often caused by the plant simply not getting enough calcium from its soil. The mountain families prevent it entirely, naturally and for free, with their saved-up eggshells. They dry the shells out thoroughly, they crush and grind them up as fine as they possibly can, and the finer the better here, because finely ground shell breaks down and feeds the plant far faster than big coarse pieces, and they work that fine eggshell powder right down into the soil all around their plants, especially around their beloved tomatoes. Then, as it slowly breaks down over the weeks and months of the growing season, it feeds a steady, gentle, constant supply of calcium straight to the hungry roots, and the result is strong, vigorous, healthy plants and big, beautiful, unblemished fruit. Here's exactly how you do it yourself. Save up all of your eggshells over time, let them dry out completely, and then crush and grind them as fine as you possibly can. Many of the old mountain folk grind theirs right down into a fine powder, sometimes in an old grinder or with a pestle. Then work that powder right into the soil around your tomatoes and your vegetables, or mix a good handful straight into the planting hole when you put a new young plant into the ground. Over the whole season, it quietly feeds them all the calcium they so desperately crave. The very thing you were about to throw straight into the trash this morning becomes the secret behind the very best, biggest, healthiest harvest of your entire life, and it costs you absolutely nothing at all. And here's the honest part, the part I always want to give you straight. This one isn't just old folklore. An eggshell really is almost pure calcium carbonate, the very same calcium that garden centers sell in expensive bags of garden lime to do exactly this same job of feeding the soil and balancing it for hungry plants. The mountain families simply worked it out for free generations before anyone was selling it in a bag, by watching what happened when they dug their shells into the ground. The only catch worth knowing is patience. Ground shell feeds the soil slowly, over a season rather than all at once, which is exactly why the old folks save their shells all year round and work them in steadily, so the soil is always being quietly fed. Slow and steady and free, the mountain way, instead of fast and expensive from a shop. And those aren't even quite all of the uses, because the mountain thrift runs deeper still. Some of the old folk drop a crushed shell or two right into the pot with their coffee grounds because they find it cuts the bitterness and makes for a smoother, gentler brew. Some keep a few crushed shells in a little cloth bag and toss it in with their white laundry, an old trick they swear helps keep their whites looking bright and clean. And come the spring, many of them scatter finely crushed shells out for the wild birds, because the nesting mother birds desperately need extra calcium at that time of year to lay their own eggs, a small, kind gift back to nature from the breakfast table. They also scatter coarse, sharp shells over the garden beds to keep cats and digging animals from scratching them up, since animals dislike the sharp feel under their paws just as the slugs do. And a handful of crushed shells with a splash of water makes a fine scrubbing scour for a pan with food burnt and stuck to the bottom, the same trick as the bottles, just out in the open pan. One humble shell, and use after use after use, in the kitchen, in the garden, in the hen house, and out in the wild. That is the mountain way through and through. So let's bring it all together now, because when you step right back and look at everything we've covered here today, you suddenly realize that the eggshell you've been mindlessly throwing away every single morning of your life was never ever garbage at all. It's a free scrubber for the jars and bottles that nothing else can clean. It's a sharp, natural barrier that protects your plants from the slugs and snails that would devour them. It's a perfect little seed pot that feeds the seedling as it grows up. It's free drainage and free calcium for your flower pots. It's rich minerals for your compost heap. It's food that goes right back to your hens to make the next eggs strong. It cuts the bitterness in your coffee, brightens your whites, and even feeds the wild birds in spring. And above all of it, it's the great secret to rich soil and the biggest, healthiest vegetables you have ever grown. All of that, every bit of it, from something you crack open and drop in the bin every single morning without ever giving it a thought. And here's the thing that really, truly stays with me through all of it. The mountain families don't save their eggshells because they're poor and desperate and have nothing else. They save them because they genuinely see the whole world differently than we've been taught to. Where we see worthless waste, they see real worth. Where we see an empty shell to be thrown straight out, they see food for the garden, a shield for their plants, and the very calcium for tomorrow's eggs. They live by a simple, powerful, almost forgotten idea that nothing useful should ever be thrown away while it still has any good left in it to give. It made them thrifty, it made them deeply self-reliant, and in the end it made them free from ever needing to run out and buy what they could so easily provide for themselves out of what was already right there in their own two hands. They look down at a humble eggshell and they see a dozen good uses. We look down at the very same shell and we see nothing but trash to be hauled away. And the only real difference between us and them, the entire difference, is knowledge. The kind of plain, ordinary, practical knowledge that was once completely commonplace, that everyone simply had, and that we somehow managed to let slip right through our fingers in the space of a single, rushed, forgetful generation. But here is the truly wonderful and hopeful part of it all. None of it is genuinely lost. It's all still right here, waiting patiently for you to pick it back up and put it to use again. So tomorrow morning, when you crack your eggs for breakfast, don't reach for the bin out of habit. Instead, rinse those shells out, set them somewhere to dry, and start saving them up in a little container on the counter. And then try just one of these things, crush some up for your garden beds, scatter a protective ring around your plants, start a seed in a little half shell, or grind them down fine for your tomatoes this coming season. I promise you that once you start, you will never look at a humble eggshell the same way again, and you'll find yourself beginning to wonder what else you've been carelessly throwing away all these years that was never really waste at all. Now, I would truly love to hear from you on this one. Did your own family ever save their eggshells back in the day for the garden, for the compost heap, for the chickens, or for something else entirely? What did your parents or your grandparents teach you that you must never, ever throw away? Tell me all about it down in the comments below, and please do let me know where in the world you're watching from today. I read every single one of them, and there is honestly nothing I love more in this world than hearing these old habits and traditions, and knowing that this precious wisdom is still alive and well in good people like you. And if you'd like to keep on learning these old mountain ways right alongside me, how these families keep their food fresh for a whole year with no fridge at all, how they heat their homes through the coldest of winters for almost nothing, and so very many more clever things that the modern world so carelessly threw away, then stay right here and stay close to the warmth of the fire with me. There is so very much more still left to share. Until next time, my friend, take good care of yourself, take good care of the ones you love, and never, ever let the old wisdom be lost. Because every shell you save and every old skill you bring back to life keeps a little piece of that wisdom alive for the ones who come after us.